The story behind Good Omens and all the Queen references CINEMABLEND. Spoilers ahead for Good Omens on Amazon. When Good Omens premiered on Amazon as an adaptation of the Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett novel of the same name, it proved three things: the apocalypse can be hilarious, the characters could cast, and the music of Queen. While all the Queen tunes to book fans, viewers who never picked up a copy of the novel were undoubtedly at least a little perplexed at all the Freddie Mercury. Well, viewers probably noticed that the Queen tunes generally played in scenes featuring Crowley and Slash or the Bentley. The explanation: Crowley was currently doing 110 mph somewhere east of Slough. Nothing about him. When Good Omens was published in 1990, tapes were the non-radio way to play music in cars. Neil Gaiman revealed, if the joke had stopped with just the one Queen mention in the book, the Good Omens show probably wouldn't have been packed with Queen songs. Instead, the Vivaldi's 4. Crowley briefly considered putting the tape on which Head trapped Hayster into the Bentley and leaving it for a fortnight, turning him into Freddie Mercury. He decided against. Now, the differences between book and television meant that the show had the freedom to use Queen more liberally than the book, which basically required Crowley to be in the Bentley on the page. The show could just, given that technology in the past 30 years has definitely moved away from cassette tapes, the Good Omens adaptation was bound to get creative with including the running Queen joke from the book. So, although Crowley technically made his debut earlier in the first episode at the Garden of Eden, his arrival in the Bentley to pick up the Antichrist was a real entrance. Could the show have done? Crowley's arrival was actually only one instance of Bohemian. So why does Crowley's arrival get special mention among the many uses of Bohemian? Another memorable Queen sequence came in the second episode after a collision between Crowley in the Bentley and Anathema on her bicycle. Despite Aziraphale, this scene is an example of a completely on-the-nose use of Queen for a Good Omens scene, and it appeared not to be a song actually playing in Crowley's car. Even if things were getting out of control by the time Crowley climbed into his Bentley and raced to Soho to find Aziraphale in episode 5, having just escaped Hayster and Ligut. Queen's uplifting, the use of your. It was a sign of Crowley's desperation that he was willing to drive his beloved Bentley into the inferno surrounding London. When Hayster escaped, if the gramophone playing your. No, before I am. By the time Crowley arrived in Tadfield in episode 5, he was holding the burning Bentley together by sheer strength of will and imagination. He also never. Why is this one of the most noteworthy uses of Queen in Good Omens? Well, it was also arguably the last big moment for the Bentley, which would be destroyed shortly after arriving at the airbase in episode 6 when Crowley had to start focusing on things other than holding his car together. Amazon released 2 big trailers for Good Omens ahead of the premiere, and both used Queen to perfection. The first showcased, the right music can make a trailer completely unforgettable, as with for Season 2 and for Season 3, and under. You can catch all 6 episodes of Good Omens with all of these and more Queen songs, streaming on Amazon now. The finished product.
Raindrop, drop top, smoking, no cooking the hot pot. Fucking on your bitch, yeah, that. Looking up, open the park pot.